Hi, I'm Emily Jacobson, and this is my inquiry model lesson. Inquiry lessons require that teachers engage students with content in a way so that they can explore, discover, and think critically about new concepts. Students will be active participants in their learning process by using their own knowledge to generate ideas about what they see or sense. Guided and unguided inquiry requires the students to look at raw data and then use theories to explain how that data can be connected to different concepts. The purpose of inquiry is to focus on good questions instead of right answers. This allows students to use what they already know, regardless of their intelligence level or diverse experiences. The subject of this lesson is business fundamentals. The age and the grade would be high school, 9th and 10th graders, so they're between 14 and 16 years old. The standards that are touched on in this lesson are explaining the roles of the local and state government and identifying different areas of civil law that impact businesses. Some learning objectives for this lesson are that students will be able to identify the different government regulations that affect businesses. They will reason about the situation and generate observations that they perceive as relevant from the example given. This will also enable students to defend their choices when they use their data. I chose unguided inquiry for this lesson because it allows students to synthesize information and make sense out of what they observe. It also accommodates diverse learners by focusing on their thoughts and responses, not the teacher's. This model places more emphasis on the student's ability to think through problems and gives students more chances to contribute their thoughts, whether they're on a lower intellectual level or a higher one. The students will be given a scenario about how a food truck is parked on a local city street within a couple hundred feet of a coffee shop and an Italian restaurant. The owner of the food truck business finds a $2,000 fine on his window. The students will then have to have questions that they have to answer in order to come up with the reason for the large fine. They're able to work with a partner, use the internet, use the library, and ask me clarifying questions. In phase 1 of the inquiry lesson, you need to provide data. There needs to be some sort of event or unstructured data for students to observe. Students then need to generate observations about the event or data and provide statements or questions that allow them to collect more information. My students will be given the scenario about the food truck and the fine for the business fundamentals lesson. After reading through the scenario, they'll start generating ideas about why the business was fined. Phase 2 is to make observations and ask questions. In this phase of the lesson, students are to examine the data and make relevant observations. The teacher keeps track of the students' ideas and observations. My students will demonstrate this in the business fundamentals lesson by reading through the scenario given and answering the questions, by collaborating with others and researching business regulations. They will use technology to gather information on the most recent government regulations for local businesses. I will do a formative assessment by walking around the room and making sure all students are on task. I will also be there to guide students if they are lost, confused, or need clarification. Phase 3 is to create generalizations. Once data has been collected, the teacher needs to determine which student generalizations have a relationship with the objective. As long as the generalizations can show what data they use to support their ideas, it will be acceptable. I will ask clarifying questions to my students to formatively assess them and their ideas. The students' ideas will then be shown to their classmates to generate a larger group discussion from the data gathered. Phase 4 is to follow up. To follow up in this lesson, the students should be asked questions or required to take part in different activities so that they can refine their thinking and consider any additional information that may be required. The student should be able to defend their statement about the scenario and be able to make predictions based on generalizations. My students will follow up this lesson by choosing which generalizations have the most correlation to the scenario given. They will then be required to come up with a what-if prediction. This will help them to think critically about the decision that they have made. I learned that this model is solely focused on what the students know instead of what the teacher can teach the students. This lesson proved to be very beneficial to my students. The inquiry setup allows all students to have the same opportunities to learn new material no matter what their experiences are or what their intellectual abilities are. It also pushes them to think critically instead of simply memorizing new material. At first, my students were getting frustrated because I wouldn't give them enough information, but after a while, it became almost like a competition to them. The students got really into it and wanted to come up with the right answer before their peers. Once the students collected enough data, they all started collaborating with each other and coming up with even more ideas. I would say that the follow-up activities were very beneficial for summative assessments. I assessed what their end results were and their what-if predictions as a conclusion to what they have learned and if they met their goals and objectives. Here are my references.